Forget the storybook version of the Middle Ages, the one painted with gallant knights, radiant queens, and castles glowing beneath a golden sunset. The truth was far grimmer. Behind the poetry of chivalry and the illusion of honor lay a world where life was cheap, comfort was rare, and death was always near. For most, survival wasn't a grand adventure. It was a daily negotiation with hunger, disease, and fear. So let's peel back the romance and step into the real Middle Ages, where the air stank of sweat and smoke, and where the simplest act of living could be a test of endurance. Take something as ordinary as communication. Imagine, for a moment, you wake up in 14th century England, same planet, different world. The moment someone speaks, confusion hits you like a brick wall. The language sounds familiar yet alien, rough and broken, and you realize you don't understand a single word. Now here's a question for you. If you suddenly found yourself stranded in that world, cut off by language, custom, and danger, how long do you think you'd survive? And where in the world are you watching from tonight? The common folk spoke Middle English, which sounds almost alien to modern ears. The upper classes and nobility mostly used French, a leftover from the Norman conquest. And the clergy, the educated elite, spoke only in church Latin. So unless you somehow knew all three, you'd be completely lost. Maybe, just maybe, you'd recognize a stray word or two, but having an actual conversation? Impossible. You'd be a stranger in a world that shared your language's roots, but not its voice. Now, let's say you managed to pick up a bit of the local tongue. But fate dealt you another challenge. You were born a woman. That's when you'd truly understand what hardship meant in the medieval world. Because of the heavy influence of biblical teachings, women were often seen as morally fragile and easily corrupted. They were expected to obey, to remain silent, and to stay under male authority at all times. The writings of St. Paul, in particular, reinforced that women should submit to their husbands and keep quiet in church, shaping centuries of oppression. For the average peasant woman, life was a relentless cycle of labor. She was responsible not just for domestic chores, spinning, weaving, brewing ale, cooking, tending to animals, and raising children, but also for working side by side with men in the fields. Her life was labor from dawn until dusk, without recognition or rest. Women had only two acceptable paths: marriage or the convent. And most, of course, had little choice but the first. Marriage meant pregnancy, and pregnancy meant facing the most dangerous trial of all, childbirth. There were no sterile instruments, no doctors, no anesthetics, only hope and prayer. Even the smallest complication, one that would be easily treated today, could take both mother and child. Wealth and nobility offered no protection either. Even queens and duchesses died on the birthing bed. Caesarean sections were performed only if the mother was dying or had already died. In 1420s Florence, records show that 1 in 5 women didn't survive childbirth. It was so common that expectant mothers were often advised to write a will before going into labor, a grim ritual that stripped away any joy from what should have been a sacred moment of life. And if a woman did survive, her newborn faced a perilous beginning. Today, the death of a child is a heartbreaking rarity. In the Middle Ages, it was almost expected. 1/3 of children never lived past the age of 5 in medieval England, and the danger began even before birth. Without understanding the effects of alcohol or poor nutrition, many medieval women drank ale or wine throughout pregnancy, often in large quantities. Their diets were poor, limited, lacking essential nutrients, and this made both mother and child far more vulnerable. Infant mortality rates were staggering. Historians estimate that in medieval Europe, anywhere between 20 to 30% of children died before the age of 7. Some perished during childbirth, others from accidents, famine, or the endless waves of disease that swept through the population. Common illnesses like whooping cough, influenza, measles, or even basic stomach infections, ailments that modern medicine can easily cure, were often death sentences back then. And while the world was harsher, the pain of loss was the same. The grief of a medieval mother holding her dying child was no less real than it would be today. For all its romantic legends, the Middle Ages were not a time of glory for most. They were an age of survival, where faith and fear often walked hand in hand, and where just staying alive was the greatest victory of all. Thousands of miles east, in the heart of medieval Japan, nearly half the population never made it past childhood. Imagine that 48% of children died before ever becoming adults. That's almost 1 out of every 2 lives cut short before it even began. And if you think you would have lived any better in medieval Europe, think again. The harsh truth is that around 85% of the population were serfs, peasants bound to the land and their lords. Odds are you would have been one of them. You wouldn't just toil for your own survival. Your labor would also feed the pockets of the noble who owned your land. You couldn't simply walk away, and even marriage required your lord's permission. In every sense, your life wasn't yours to control. You might as well have been a slave to both soil and season. Too much rain or not enough could spell ruin. Crops would fail, hunger would follow, and malnutrition would creep in like a silent plague. And when bodies grew weak, disease struck mercilessly. Dysentery, typhus, and smallpox thrived among the frail. When food did appear, it was nothing luxurious, coarse loaves of bread baked from barley, rye, or millet, and a thin, watery stew known as pottage. The forests teemed with wild game, deer, hare, rabbit, but those were reserved for the nobility. If a poor man dared to hunt them, the punishment for poaching could be brutal, even fatal. Clothing wasn't comfort either, rough, itchy wool that chafed the skin. And home? Most people lived in small, dark cottages with 1 or 2 cramped rooms, no chimneys, and barely any windows. The air was thick with smoke, the smell of animals, and the damp earth beneath. During harsh winters, families shared space with livestock just to stay warm. With no heating, no lighting, and no running water, life was a constant struggle against cold and filth. It's no wonder life expectancy was heartbreakingly short. Between the years 1330 and 1479, the average man lived only about 24 years. Women fared a little better, around 33 years, but still, survival was a race against time. Then there was the justice system, a grim reflection of its age. The church dominated everything, from how you dressed to what you could eat and when. Forget the idea of freedom. Even something as innocent as eating meat on a forbidden day could brand you a sinner. There were no police forces. If you were robbed or attacked, your only defense was to scream loud enough to raise a hue and cry and hope someone cared to help. There were no police forces. If you were robbed or attacked, your only defense was to scream loud enough to raise a hue and cry and hope someone cared to help. For serious crimes, punishment meant death, not just for murder or treason, but for crimes like forgery, arson, or theft. Steal anything worth more than 12 pence, about 3 weeks' wages, and you could find yourself dangling from the gallows. Justice was swift, cruel, and often public. Before formal trials, there existed the infamous trial by ordeal. Guilt or innocence was decided by fire or boiling water. Walk across burning coals, plunge your hand into scalding oil, and if you survived, God was believed to have saved the innocent. Even petty offenses, gambling, debt, swearing in public, or simply playing football in the streets, could earn you harsh humiliation in the stocks, branding, or imprisonment. And many who were jailed never made it out alive. Filthy, overcrowded prisons became death sentences of their own. Most crime was born out of poverty. People stole because they were desperate, not evil. But desperation was everywhere. And if hunger, disease, and injustice weren't enough, war loomed endlessly. The Middle Ages were soaked in conflict. Over 1,000 years, more than 370 wars raged across the world. Empires clashed, kingdoms rose and fell, and ordinary people suffered through it all. Many wars were nothing more than power struggles between nobles, deciding which incompetent ruler would next sit on the throne. Others were draped in holy justification. Like the Crusades, wars fought in the name of faith, yet driven by greed, glory, and control. But just as it often happens today, it was the ordinary people who paid the heaviest price. As a serf under the European feudal system, your fate was never truly your own. If you happened to live under a noble whose kingdom was at odds with another, you didn't have a choice, you were obligated to fight. Every peasant owed military service to their lord, and when war called, you marched whether you wished to or not. Men were usually sent off only for short campaigns. If fortune smiled upon you and you survived those 40 brutal days, you might actually make it home. Because if every working man vanished to fight, no one would remain to tend the lands, feed the animals, or serve the noble class. And without labor, there would be no crops, no wealth for the upper class to fund their endless, senseless wars. The result? Armies that were poorly trained, chaotic, and devastatingly disorganized. Countless lives were lost. Peasants, soldiers, and even nobles. Around 30% of noblemen perished in one battle or another. As for the common folk, their deaths went largely unrecorded. No one bothered to count the peasants who fell. Their lives were considered so insignificant that their loss was measured only in silence. Historians can only estimate the bloodshed of medieval warfare. During the First Crusade alone, at the Siege of Jerusalem, around 90,000 people perished. Across all the Crusades, from 1095 through the late 13th century, death claimed between 1 and 3 million lives. The 100 Years' War, spanning from 1337 to 1453, added another 2 to 3.5 million corpses to history's tally. And in Asia, the Mongol invasions and conquests of the 13th and 14th centuries brought death on a scale almost unimaginable, between 30 and 40 million souls lost. It was, without question, one of the worst times in history to be either a soldier or a peasant. Now, let's imagine you were among the privileged few, wealthy, powerful, able to afford the luxuries of the age. Surely that would have meant a safer, more comfortable life, right? Not quite. Yes, your meals would have been grand. Venison roasted in rich sauces, pork glazed with wine, delicate desserts dusted with sugar, and fine wines poured into beautiful, hand-decorated cups. But hidden beneath all that refinement was something far more sinister. The plates you ate from, those beautifully glazed dishes admired by the elite, were made using lead oxide. It looked stunning and made cleaning easier, which made it popular among nobles. Yet, when hot, salty, or acidic food touched that glaze, the lead would slowly leach into the food, and then into your body. Lead is a silent killer. It builds up in the body over time, poisoning the nervous system. Its effects: headaches, severe abdominal pain, infertility, seizures, even coma and death. Children suffered most. Their growing bodies absorbed more of it, damaging their brains and slowing their ability to learn. Archaeologists have found skeletons in medieval cemeteries of Germany and Denmark showing dangerously high levels of lead, especially among urban elites. The poison was everywhere, not just in plates, but in roof tiles, coins, and the stained glass windows that glittered in churches. When rainwater was collected from rooftops for drinking, it brought another dose of poison straight to the cup. And even the simplest food, bread, the daily lifeline of medieval Europe, concealed a hidden terror. Rye bread, the humble staple of peasants and nobles alike, often carried a deadly hitchhiker, a fungus known as Claviceps purpurea. When consumed, it unleashed a nightmare the people of the Middle Ages called St. Anthony's fire. Outbreaks of this disease swept across villages and kingdoms, killing tens of thousands and leaving countless others writhing in agony or lost in feverish delirium. What we now recognize as ergot poisoning was far more than an illness. It was a horror that blurred the line between medicine, religion, and madness. Victims experienced vivid hallucinations, violent muscle spasms, nausea, and sleepless nights haunted by visions. In the worst cases, blood ceased flowing to their limbs, causing them to blacken, rot, and eventually fall away. Fingers, toes, sometimes even entire hands or feet, were consumed by a fire that no prayer could extinguish. Some historians believe that these same outbreaks may have ignited the infamous dancing epidemics between the 14th and 17th centuries, eerie, inexplicable events where hundreds, even thousands, danced uncontrollably in the streets, as if possessed by unseen forces. They twirled and convulsed for hours, sometimes days, until they collapsed, many dying from exhaustion or heart failure. It's a haunting reminder of how fragile life was in the medieval world, and how easily survival itself could turn into a slow descent into madness. If this glimpse into the dark corners of medieval life has sparked your curiosity, share your thoughts below. Would you have recognized the danger hidden in your daily bread? And if you want to uncover more of history's strangest and most unsettling secrets, subscribe to Vassal Truths, and don't forget to like and share this video. Together, we'll keep bringing light to the forgotten fears and forgotten truths that shaped the world, one story at a time.